They said Africa had no great armies, no empires that could stand against Rome, Persia, or China. But what if I told you that thousands of years before colonialism, before gunpowder and steel, African generals commanded armies so powerful that foreign invaders trembled at their names? Armies that built empires, crushed kingdoms, and rewrote the art of war itself, yet were deliberately erased from history. This isn't the story you were taught in school. This is the story of Africa's forgotten war machines. Long before Europe learned to forge steel in quantity, deep in the heart of the Sahara, blacksmiths of Nok and Meroe were already smelting iron. These weren't isolated villages. They were the industrial centers of their age, supplying weapons to kingdoms stretching from the Nile to West Africa. From those furnaces came spearheads sharper than Roman gladius, and iron-tipped arrows that could pierce armor at incredible range. The battlefield wasn't yet Europe's to claim. Let's begin with Nubia, the kingdom of Kush. When Egypt fell into chaos, it was Nubia that rose. They trained soldiers not just to fight, but to think like architects of empire. Every warrior was a builder and a believer. Their armies marched beneath the banner of Amun, the hidden god, and their generals, men and women alike, were masters of strategy. In the 8th century BCE, the Kushites invaded Egypt not with foreign brutality, but with divine legitimacy. Pharaoh Pir didn't burn cities. He demanded their surrender through faith and fear. His army advanced like a river, silent, unstoppable, cleansing everything in its path. Egypt bowed. For nearly a century, Africa ruled the Nile from its own heartland, until foreign historians later called them black usurpers. But here's the twist. These so-called usurpers left behind temples and pyramids that rival Giza. Yet when archaeologists found them, they buried the story under the label Egyptian influence. The conquerors became the copied, the real innovators. Forgotten. Move west and you find the empire of Mali, led by the general king Sundiata Keita. His cavalry thundered across the savannah like rolling thunder. Mounted warriors, clad in iron, coordinated by drums and horns, forming formations so precise that Arab chroniclers compared them to clockwork. Every soldier knew his place. Every commander could rally thousands with a single sound. The empire of Mali wasn't just rich, it was disciplined. It was a war machine fueled by unity and intelligence. Their greatest weapon wasn't the sword, it was organization. And yet Mali wasn't alone. The Songhai Empire that came after built an army so vast that when Askia Muhammad marched, even his enemies called him the ruler of nations. His troops used river fleets on the Niger that moved faster than any army on foot. Imagine it, wooden war canoes, each manned by archers, flanking enemy lines, cutting supply routes, and burning cities from the water. This was 15th century Africa, deploying combined arms, land and naval warfare, centuries before Europe mastered it. But here's the twist again. When European chroniclers later wrote of Songhai, they focused only on its fall, not its brilliance. They wrote of the Moroccan invasion in 1591, ignoring that the Moroccans had to import European cannons to even stand a chance. Gunpowder, not genius, tipped the scale. Yet still, the Songhai legacy endured in its command structures, in its roads, in the loyalty of soldiers who fought to the death, rather than serve a foreign flag. Travel south and east, and you meet the warriors of the great Zimbabwe civilization. Their fortresses of stone, built without mortar weren't just homes. They were defensive networks designed to protect trade and treasure. Those towering walls weren't primitive. They were mathematical. Engineers arranged them to channel sound, confuse enemies, and create illusions of larger armies. Ancient African psychological warfare. Archaeologists still puzzle over how they aligned those walls with such precision, but they forget to ask the right question. Who were they defending against? The answer lies in a lost history of rival African states, waging wars of trade and ideology across the continent. A silent battlefield hidden under centuries of denial. And then came the warriors of Benin. When the Portuguese first arrived, they expected to find chaos. Instead, they found a city so organized, it shocked them. Moats, walls, guards. An army trained for both ceremony and destruction. The Oba's soldiers carried crossbows, iron swords, and even early forms of body armor. Their formations were rehearsed like theater. Their ambushes timed with terrifying precision. And when enemies attacked, they found themselves fighting an entire city designed for defense. Benin wasn't just a kingdom, it was a fortress. The British would later call their walls the greatest earthworks ever constructed before the mechanical age. And yet, when colonial forces finally conquered Benin in 1897, they called it a punitive expedition, not a war. They looted its bronzes, its weapons, its story. The victors rewrote the script, turning the defenders into savages, the masterminds into myths. But the most feared war machine of all came from the south, the Zulu. Under King Shaka, the Zulu turned warfare into science. They abandoned the long throwing spear and replaced it with the short stabbing spear, the Iklwa, named for the sound it made leaving a man's chest. Brutal efficiency. Shaka reorganized his regiments by age, discipline, and formation. His bullhorn tactic encircled enemies with terrifying speed. The horns to attack the flanks, the chest to hold the line, and the loins, reserves, to crush what remained. The Zulu didn't just fight. They performed warfare like art, and it worked. They destroyed rival kingdoms and built an empire stretching from the coast to the Drakensberg. European observers described their movements as an earthquake of men. But here's the final twist. When colonial historians retold Shaka's story, they painted him as a mad tyrant. Because acknowledging his genius meant admitting that Africa once produced one of history's greatest military minds. It was easier to call him a barbarian than a general. From Nubia to Mali, from Benin to Zululand, Africa's war machines weren't chaotic tribes. They were engineered systems, built on logic, training, and the mastery of environment. Rivers became highways, deserts became shields, iron became empire. And when foreign powers finally came with guns and maps, they didn't conquer an empty continent. They dismantled nations that had already mastered the art of power. The truth is this: the history of African warfare isn't just about battles, it's about brilliance. These armies built without blueprints, commanded without compasses, and fought not just for land, but for identity. The world erased their victories to justify their conquest. But every ruined fortress, every buried weapon, every legend still whispered in the villages proves something undeniable. Africa once led the world in the science of war. And now the story is finally being retold, not by the conquerors, but by the descendants of those who refused to bow. Because history isn't just written by the victors, it's rewritten by those who remember.